The day before the wedding, the insidious gleam of a notification lit up Eleanor's phone. It was from the private group chat at Digital Sanctuary for Callum and his 10 male childhood friends, with Seraphina, their undisputed princess, as the sole female among them. Picture popped up showing a strange, almost grotesque ring. Eleanor frowned, a flicker of confusion stirring within her, when Seraphina's message followed. Callum is so sweet. He actually made me a ring from his own rib bone. It signifies undying love. Now I don't envy Eleanor anymore. Eleanor's heart plummeted, turning to ash in her chest. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, suffocating her. With numb fingers she finally dialed her Aunt Beatrice, who lived abroad. "Auntie," Eleanor's voice was thin, almost a whisper. "I've made up my mind. I agree to the arranged marriage you spoke of." Callum emerged from the bathroom, toweling his hair dry, only to find Eleanor holding his phone. An impatient frown creased his brow. He snatched the device from her hand. "Eleanor, I don't set a password precisely because I trust you. Not so you can snoop through my phone. Do you have no trust in me at all?" Trust? How could she possibly trust him? The beloved, after all, always acts with entitled confidence, taking everything for granted. He had never given her an iota of security. Instead, he relentlessly tested her boundaries, chipping away at her resolve. Facing his interrogation, Eleanor wanted nothing more than to demand an explanation for that ring. Suddenly his phone chimed. Eleanor recognized the melody instantly. Seraphina's exclusive ringtone. Callum glanced at her then, answered the call directly in front of her, his action a clear statement. His relationship with Seraphina was open, above board. "Callum, you're getting married tomorrow. Why don't we all hang out one last time tonight?" Seraphina's voice chirped from the speaker. "All right, send me the location." He agreed to Seraphina's invitation without a moment's hesitation, then turned to Eleanor and curtly informed her, "I'll be back soon. Get some sleep, don't wait up for me." Again, he gave her no chance to speak, already changing into his clothes, ready to leave. Eleanor was uncharacteristically quiet, offering no complaints as she usually would. But Callum, blinded by his own priorities, failed to notice her strange stillness. After he left, Eleanor went through her contacts one by one, informing everyone who was invited that the wedding had been cancelled. Once the calls were made, she opened her phone, scrolling through the chat logs she had forwarded to herself from Callum's device. She found Seraphina's old message in the group chat, demanding that each of her childhood friends prepare a special gift for her before they got married. Among these men, 2 were Seraphina's actual brothers. The others either harbored affections for Seraphina, much like Callum, or doted on her like a cherished sister. Seraphina was undoubtedly the princess of this little clique. So, faced with her demand, the others had racked their brains, vying to outdo each other. Callum's contribution was a ring fashioned from his own rib bone, unique and unsettling. He had done it simply because Seraphina had once remarked, "I'm so envious of the custom-made ring Callum got for Eleanor." Reading this, Eleanor wondered about the meaning of her many years of persistence, her unwavering devotion. Callum had been unreachable the day she'd had a 103-degree fever because he was teaching Seraphina how to ice skate. When she'd been on her way home late one night, narrowly escaping an assault, he hadn't answered her desperate calls because he was helping Seraphina search for her lost dog. He cared for Seraphina, he loved Seraphina. Yet, years ago in their youth, he had actively pursued and courted Eleanor. Callum stayed out all night, returning only as dawn broke. He called her, his voice slurred and heavy. "Eleanor, I'm really drunk. The wedding's off. Go ahead and tell everyone." His tone was as casual as canceling a game. After hanging up, Eleanor saw the reason for the cancellation on Seraphina's social media. Seraphina had posted a video with the caption, "The most thrilling game ever. Who dares?" The video showed Seraphina's group of drunken childhood friends. A guy named Leo slurred, "Callum, do you dare to cancel tomorrow's wedding for Seraphina?" The others erupted in laughter and cheers, while Seraphina looked at Callum with an expectant, almost hopeful gaze. Callum met Seraphina's gaze with a gaze Eleanor had once believed was meant for her, then scoffed, "What's there to be afraid of? Eleanor is like a cotton doll, she never gets angry. Besides, she can't leave me. It's just canceling a wedding." Eleanor's breath hitched. Indeed, just as Callum had said, she was like a cotton doll. Insults and blows seemed to bounce off her, causing no real pain. He had even once, in front of his friends and Serafina, said, "Eleanor is a lonely orphan no one wants or loves. If I'm just a little bit nice to her, she'll never leave me. I guess I'm stuck with her forever." Haha. Eleanor had been there, slightly dizzy from a drink, pretending not to hear his venomous words. Callum had always believed his words couldn't truly hurt her because, in their 7 years of dating, she had never once lost her temper with him. But this time she wouldn't be that pain-unaware cotton doll anymore. Aunt Beatrice called again, inquiring about her travel plans. She seemed to have already guessed the collapse of Eleanor and Callum's relationship. Her voice, tinged with a knowing satisfaction, echoed through the receiver. "I told you so. I had a path laid out for you but you wouldn't take it. Now you know, don't you? What's the use of being good to someone? People change." This time, Eleanor listened in silence, no longer bristling like a cornered cat, ready to retort. In truth, during her senior year of high school, Aunt Beatrice had already completed all the paperwork for Eleanor to study abroad, wanting to bring her to live with her. Aunt Beatrice was a formidable businesswoman, unmarried and childless, who had built a successful career overseas with her own hands. When Eleanor was 13, her parents had died in a car accident. The driver responsible had committed suicide, and his elderly parents had no means of compensation. Eleanor had become a burden, shuttled between her uncles, her aunts, and her cousins' homes like a parasite, from one household to another. She had lived that dependent existence for 8 long years. Then Aunt Beatrice, who had been abroad for years and rarely contacted the family, learned of Eleanor's plight and decided to take her in. Her father had funded Aunt Beatrice's overseas education and living expenses years ago. Perhaps out of gratitude, Aunt Beatrice, now successful, had finally thought of Eleanor. But Eleanor, after years of living under others' roofs and unwilling to leave Callum, had resolutely refused her. Yet, Aunt Beatrice hadn't given up. She had funded Eleanor's high school and university living expenses, returning every holiday to take her on trips to various places. She had slowly begun to mend Eleanor's emotional wounds, speaking of her father's kindness, how he had doted on her, his younger sister. Aunt Beatrice promised to treat Eleanor just as her father had treated her. Footsteps echoed outside the door, and the next second it opened. Callum was back. Eleanor quickly said a few words to Aunt Beatrice and hung up. Callum, pulling off his shoes, scoffed. "It's your aunt again, isn't it? Just because she married some old man abroad, she wants you to do the same. Does she think you're just an object? Why are you still in contact with her?" Eleanor quirked her lips, a sarcastic smile touching them. Callum was the one who treated her like an object. She had never told him Aunt Beatrice's true identity. After all, however rich Aunt Beatrice was, it was her money. Eleanor didn't want to rely on it, fearing Callum would see her as a pathetic creature who needed others' wealth to overcome her insecurities around him. "Callum, I want to go live with my aunt." Callum froze for a moment when she said this, then dismissed it with an indifferent sneer. "You're not seriously going to marry some old man abroad, are you? Stop being angry. I've rescheduled our wedding. It's next Monday. This time it won't change." He paused, then added, "I even told my mom to inform all our relatives. My mom said if I change my mind again they'll kill me, so don't worry." His words reminded her of their previous wedding, which had been so simple that Callum had only informed his parents and a few close friends. He had told his friends that there was no point in a grand wedding if he wasn't marrying the person he really wanted. Eleanor had only discovered this by checking their private group chat that day. She had been foolish enough to believe even then that he at least liked her. It brought to mind a question she'd once seen. "What has your partner done that made you feel you could entrust your life to them?" Eleanor had immediately thought of a time in college when she was working a part-time job and had nearly been assaulted. When Callum found out, he had beaten the man half to death. The man had threatened to send Callum to jail. Callum, still fiercely punching him, had scoffed. "I'd rather spend my whole life in jail than let you touch her. Do you know who you just laid a hand on? I wouldn't even dare touch her myself." That was the most touched she had ever been, because, just as Callum said, she had been with him since she was 18, and even after they both went to college and dated for 4 years, he had always respected her, never crossing any lines. That was the first time she had felt loved and protected since losing her parents. That night, as they drifted to sleep, Callum held her and casually murmured, Eleanor, don't be angry anymore. You know I like to play around, but I promise I'll settle down eventually. Eleanor remained silent, allowing him to hold her. This was their last moment of tenderness. He believed she was merely angry, but she was deeply disappointed. This time she wouldn't wait for him to return from his wild ways. As the day of her departure for abroad drew nearer, Callum noticed Eleanor hadn't been speaking to him much. He assumed she was still angry about the cancelled wedding, so he organized a gathering with their group of childhood friends, claiming he wanted to help Eleanor integrate into their circle. To show his sincerity, he even added her to their private chat. Eleanor felt it was pointless and wanted to refuse, but Callum insisted. When they arrived at the private room they had booked, everyone greeted Eleanor warmly, urging her to sit. The only one missing from the group was Serafina. Eleanor didn't care to ask, but she suspected Callum had forewarned them about her presence, as they had always been unwelcoming in the past. Serafina's reaction had always been the most severe, so Eleanor assumed Serafina's absence today was her way of showing her disdain. But no sooner had she sat down than Callum leaned over and whispered that he was going to pick up Serafina. He mumbled something about Serafina being slow. Yet after he left, Serafina's older brother, Sebastian, moved past the others and sat directly next to Eleanor. He spoke plainly. Eleanor, to be honest, Serafina isn't coming, because she doesn't want you to join our little group. You should be sensible and not make things difficult for everyone. He continued, his voice low. Today consider it us brothers playing along with Callum. After this, things will go back to how they were. You and Serafina are incomparable, just as Callum will always choose Serafina. Eleanor silently sipped the drink in her glass, maintaining a calm facade, feigning indifference, but inside, her heart was churning with turmoil. She had clung to the pitiful scraps of affection Callum had thrown her way, seeing them as salvation. Yet, when compared to Serafina, those hopes were shattered into dust. When Callum returned, he was, as expected, accompanied by Serafina. Eleanor couldn't fathom what Callum had promised her, but Serafina sat beside her with a smile, raising her glass in apology. Eleanor, please don't take that game seriously. We were just messing around. Don't blame them, we're always like that. We didn't think before we spoke. You're so generous you won't be angry with us, right? Let's drink this glass and from now on you'll be one of us. She finished with a playful grin and the others raised their glasses, apologizing one by one. Eleanor smiled faintly, drinking the wine in her hand and accepting their apology gracefully. But it wasn't to become a member of their clique, it was for her farewell feast. From now on she would have no connection to them. Eleanor rarely drank, and after just one glass she felt uncomfortably unwell. The others were still drinking, but Callum and Serafina had disappeared. Eleanor didn't care what they were up to. The private room, however, felt stifling, and the pervasive smell of alcohol made her nauseous. She stood up, a little unsteady, and walked toward the door. The moment she pulled it open, a gust of cool air swept over her, clearing her head slightly. She took out her phone, intending to text Callum that she was leaving, but then she heard his and Serafina's voices nearby. Following the sound, she rounded a corner and confirmed it was them. The hallway lights were dim, and they were wrapped in an embrace, oblivious to her presence. Serafina, Callum's voice was laced with desperation. It's been so many years, why won't you say yes to me? Doesn't that ring prove my heart to you? Callum, don't be like this. I just want to treat everyone equally. Isn't it better if we just remain friends forever, with this kind of relationship? They spoke of being friends, yet their actions were those of lovers. Eleanor hated herself for only now seeing their true colors. The next second, Callum's words twisted the dagger in her heart. Serafina, if you agree to marry me, I'll cancel the wedding again for you. Please say yes, okay? Callum, if I agree, it wouldn't be fair to the others. If we became a couple, how could I face them? I don't want our little group to disband because of us. Eleanor didn't need to hear any more. She didn't send Callum a message. Instead, she quietly walked down the opposite corridor. Back at home, she packed her luggage, changed her flight, and decided to leave a day early. The next day after tomorrow was Callum's rescheduled wedding. Her original flight was for tomorrow, but now she felt sickened by the thought of spending even another second near Callum. She hailed a taxi in the middle of the night and headed to the airport. Her flight was scheduled for 6 a.m. She had 4 hours until departure. Shortly after she arrived at the airport, Callum's message came through. "Why did you leave without saying anything? Don't call me tomorrow to rush me, okay? We're getting married soon. I want to let loose for a day. You don't mind, do you?" Eleanor couldn't help but scoff. She picked up her phone and texted back. "No, I don't mind. You can let loose for a lifetime. Haha, I even praised you for being like a cotton doll, never getting angry. Are you angry now?" Eleanor ignored him, silently turning off her phone. When she landed, Aunt Beatrice wasn't there to pick her up. Eleanor was used to being unnoticed, but her disappointment lasted only a second before Aunt Beatrice sent her a contact number. "Eleanor, I've had my secretary Liam pick you up at the airport. Just call him." Eleanor smiled. Aunt Beatrice had everything arranged. Just as she dialed the number, a magnetic male voice spoke from above her. "You must be Miss Eleanor Lynn?" Eleanor looked up, startled, to see a refined-looking man extending his hand with a smile. "Hello, my name is Liam Shaw. The chairwoman sent me to pick you up." Recovering, Eleanor quickly shook his hand. Throughout the drive, he meticulously inquired about her dietary habits and politely explained the historical landmarks of the city, preventing the atmosphere from becoming awkward. Eleanor was not a person of many words. Aunt Beatrice's villa was enormous, with countless household staff. Honestly, Eleanor had only seen such scenes in movies. Experiencing it in reality was quite a shock. She knew Aunt Beatrice was wealthy, but she hadn't realized just how wealthy. It seemed her company was thriving, and the arranged marriage was merely a cherry on top. Looking at the meticulously decorated princess room, tears blurred her vision. Felt wonderful to be cared for. In the afternoon, Aunt Beatrice returned from her company, took Eleanor out for dinner, and bought her many gifts. Eleanor still felt somewhat reserved around her aunt, but Aunt Beatrice simply stroked her head tenderly and said nothing. In person, she wasn't as talkative as she was on the phone, which Eleanor found a little unsettling. That night, as Eleanor took out her phone, she found she had been removed from Serafina's group chat. Serafina had even sent her a private message to inform her, and to explain what had happened at the gathering. "Eleanor, my apology that day was just for Callum's sake. Don't think you can integrate into our group. Our decade-long friendship isn't something you can just join. If Callum hadn't promised that even after marriage, he'd still put me first in his heart, I wouldn't have bothered apologizing to you." So that was the benefit Callum had promised her. Just as Eleanor was about to turn off her phone for the night, Callum called. "Eleanor, where are you? The wedding is about to start tomorrow. Don't throw a tantrum now. You don't want to get married, do you?" It seemed Callum had returned home. "Yes, I don't want to get married. You can go ahead and announce the cancellation of the wedding yourself." Eleanor adopted his casual tone from that morning, informing him with feigned indifference. He exploded. It was the first time she had ever defied him. After a moment of stunned silence on the other end, he gnashed his teeth as if compromising. "Do you know how many people I invited to this wedding? We might not care about losing face, but my parents do." His voice rose. "You'd better show up on time tomorrow, or you can forget about ever marrying me." Eleanor laughed uncaringly and hung up. She hadn't wanted to marry him for a long time, Callum. The next morning, Aunt Beatrice arranged for her secretary Liam Shaw to take Eleanor on a tour of her company. Meanwhile, back in China, Callum was frantically calling Eleanor. "Eleanor, the wedding is about to start. If you don't show up, I'm marrying Serafina. Don't you dare regret it then." His threats spilled out, expecting her to grovel as she always had. But Eleanor would no longer demean herself. "Callum, then I wish you and her 100 years of happiness and many children. Goodbye, Callum." Saying those words felt like a huge release, a definitive end to her chapter with Callum. When Callum tried to call her back, he found her number blocked. He stared at his parents, who were beaming with joy, and the many relatives gathered for the wedding. In a fit of rage, he slammed his fist into the wall. Then, with eyes full of desperate hope, he looked at Serafina. "Serafina, will you marry me? I'm only asking you this once. If you refuse, I'll never bother you again, and I'll leave our group forever." Serafina glanced at him, hesitating, but then, thinking of Callum's thinly veiled threat, her face darkened and she nodded. Callum stared blankly, unsure how to react, his face devoid of the joy he had anticipated. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Marrying Serafina had been his long-cherished dream. But now that she had agreed, he felt a strange pang of regret. Could time truly diminish one's feelings for someone? And why did the bride in his mind's eye suddenly become Eleanor? When the wedding officially began, no one noticed that the bride wasn't Eleanor. Callum had never introduced Eleanor to his relatives and friends. Only his parents looked bewildered. "What kind of trick are you playing, you rascal? Where's Eleanor?" Callum stood frozen, unable to answer. He didn't know where Eleanor was either, but more than her disappearance, he was furious that this was the first time Eleanor had ever defied him. So, after only a second of shock, his face turned livid. "The person I've always loved is Serafina. Haven't you two always wanted Serafina to be your daughter-in-law?" He glared at his parents. "Don't ever mention Eleanor again. Serafina will be upset." As soon as the words left his mouth, he repeated internally, "The person I love is Serafina, the person I've always loved is Serafina." His parents, seeing their son's resolve, discreetly closed their mouths, understanding. Callum didn't remember how the wedding concluded, but the first thing he did after it ended was send Eleanor a photo of him and Serafina married. "Eleanor, thank you for making it possible for Serafina and me." Callum nervously stared at his phone screen, expecting Eleanor's jealous reply, waiting for her to say she had made a mistake. But after a long pause, Eleanor only replied, "You're welcome. It was my fault for being so foolish before. I should have set you free sooner." He had intended to provoke Eleanor, but her reply filled him with a strange sense of regret. Across the ocean, Eleanor looked at Callum's childish act and found it laughable. He didn't know that Serafina had already sent her a video, eager for Eleanor to see the spectacle, before he had sent his photo. That night, Callum drank heavily, hoping to numb himself and stop thinking about Eleanor. After the guests had dispersed, he vaguely heard Serafina on the phone. The voice came from the bathroom. Serafina's tone was agitated, as if she were arguing with someone. Callum, sobered by curiosity, slowly crept closer. He then heard a truth that filled him with unparalleled fury. "Leo, what are you going to do about the baby in my belly?" "What do you mean, what? You've been with everyone but Callum. How do I know if the baby is mine? Women like you are only good for fun. Only a fool like Callum would marry you." Eleanor, who was dining with Liam, excused herself quickly as Callum's video calls kept coming in. She walked to the bathroom and answered the call, ready to unleash her anger. Instead, she saw Callum sitting on the floor, his face flushed with drink, his eyes bloodshot and alarming. He looked like he'd had too much. "Eleanor, I'm giving you one last chance. If you come back, I'll treat you the same as before." He paused, his voice softening. "You just don't like Serafina, do you? I know everything. If you come back, I promise I'll never see her again." Eleanor couldn't help but scoff. So he knew. He knew she got jealous, yet he had repeatedly done things to make her jealous and miserable. "Callum, I'm not coming back. You asked if I wanted to be like my aunt, didn't you?" Eleanor's voice was firm, unwavering. "Now I'll answer you. Yes, I will marry an old man abroad just like my aunt, and I will never look back for you." Callum saw her resolve and suddenly pointed a finger at her, sneering. "Good, you have backbone. I wonder if someone with such backbone has forgotten the pain of living under other people's roofs all those years. Looks like you still enjoy humiliating yourself." Eleanor's hand trembled as she ended the call. Tears unbidden streamed down her face. Callum knew exactly how to stab her where it hurt most. The pain she had once confided in him, the pain that had made him her perceived savior, had now become the very blade he used against her. Her body slid down the cold wall, and she crouched on the floor, frantically wiping away tears. Her entire body shook with rage, a suffocating knot of anger tightening in her chest. During those 8 years of living under others' roofs, she had to be careful even when picking up a dish, always watching the adults' expressions. She dared not take a second bowl of rice. Her hair, due to malnutrition, was perpetually dry and straw-like, and she remained small and thin. They had given her many cruel nicknames, words she still couldn't bear to recall. For 8 years she had endured various hateful insults. Her younger cousins had called her a parasite, telling her to get out of their house. Her aunts had called her a jinx who had cursed her parents to death, asking why she hadn't died with them, adding to their troubles by staying alive. She knew she was a burden, yet she dared not die. She desperately wanted to live, to grow up. Lost in the dust of her inferiority, she had clutched onto Callum as her lifeline. She had tearfully revealed her scars to him. He had held her, gently patting her back, telling her, "It's okay. I'll be here for you from now on." Back then, even though his heart was still filled with Serafina, he would naturally and constantly put food into her bowl at meals. He never allowed his friends to say a harsh word to her. As long as Serafina wasn't around, he would always prioritize protecting her. When Eleanor emerged from the bathroom after reapplying her makeup, Liam still noticed her reddened eyes. He didn't ask what had happened. Instead, he changed the subject, saying he wanted to take her somewhere. For the past few days, he had been her constant companion. Aunt Beatrice had specifically given him time off to be her guide. He had indeed lived up to expectations, taking excellent care of her. After leaving the restaurant, he told her to rest in the back seat of the car. He said their journey would be a little long. Eleanor, feeling drowsy, fell into a deep sleep in the back seat. When she woke, her eyes met the view of a wonderfully therapeutic small town. There were rolling mountains, clear streams, far from the hustle and bustle, leaving only peace and beauty that calmed her heart like a still lake. "Let's get out. I'll show you around." He smiled faintly as he turned, his deep-set eyes and smile instantly etching themselves into her heart. Her feet gently touched the grass, and a soft breeze caressed her face. All the unpleasantness seemed to vanish. Half a month later, Aunt Beatrice asked Eleanor with a smile what she thought of Liam. Eleanor thought seriously. Liam was considerate, gentle, and polite in his speech and mannerisms. He was indeed a wonderful person. So she instinctively blurted out, "He's very good." Aunt Beatrice's smile slowly deepened, becoming more knowing. Then she dropped a bombshell. Liam was not her secretary at all. He was Eleanor's arranged marriage partner. And it was he who had proactively suggested getting to know Eleanor first, to allow her to become familiar with him, fearing she might not like him. This suggestion had perfectly aligned with Aunt Beatrice's wishes, and she had readily agreed to his plan, collaborating with him in this charade. Eleanor was more surprised, but overwhelmingly, she felt relieved. She was so fortunate it was him indeed. When Liam asked her out again, it was to apologize. His words were sincere, and he watched her expression carefully, afraid she might be angry. Seeing his sudden formality, Eleanor chuckled, assuring him it was all right. The tense atmosphere instantly warmed. He reverted to his usual talkative self. After the truth was revealed, he took Eleanor to meet his parents. His parents were both very kind. He, fearing she might feel awkward, stayed by her side almost constantly. He truly excelled at caring for others. Soon after, they held their wedding as scheduled. The wedding was grand, and due to both families' significant influence in business, news of the marriage was extensively reported in newspapers. It remained a trending topic online for several days, known to all. Meanwhile, back in China, Callum suddenly stopped eating when he saw the report. Mrs. Hayes was the first to gasp in surprise. "Oh my goodness, is that really Eleanor?" Mr. Hayes also looked incredulous. How did she manage to climb so high? Marry someone so wealthy? "Yeah, Callum," his mother prodded. "Didn't you say her aunt wasn't doing well abroad? How did she become a chairwoman?" Crack. The chopsticks in Callum's hand snapped. Serafina, who had been sitting quietly beside him, dropped her own chopsticks in fright. If one looked closely, her face was noticeably swollen on one side. After 2 hours of wedding festivities, Liam went to the bathroom to wash up. Just then, Eleanor received a call from an unknown number. She answered, but no one spoke. Just as she was about to hang up, a familiar male voice came through the receiver. "Eleanor, are you really married?" Eleanor recognized Callum. Each syllable seemed to tremble as it was forced through his gritted teeth. Since their last video call, she had blocked all his contact methods. She never expected him to find her again on her wedding night. But thinking about it, this marriage was so grand, so widely publicized both domestically and internationally. It wasn't surprising that he would see the news. "Didn't I tell you already? I came to my aunt specifically to get married. Are you and your childhood sweetheart happy without me?" After a long pause, he finally uttered, Why didn't you wait for me? Serafina and it was all fake. I didn't register our marriage. Marrying her was just to make you jealous." Callum grew more agitated, but Eleanor found it only laughable. She listened to the sound of water running in the bathroom, wanting only to hang up quickly. None of that matters to me anymore. You don't need to tell me. By the way, my husband is waiting for me to take a bath together. I'll hang up now. Eleanor, the water's warm. You can come in now. Liam's voice called from the bathroom. Eleanor smiled in response, tossed her phone aside, and walked toward the bathroom. After the wedding, Eleanor wanted to return to China to visit her parents alone, but Liam was worried. He worked late for several nights finishing his tasks, then accompanied her on the journey home. Aunt Beatrice had wanted to join, but was too busy with work and had to give up the idea. To Eleanor's surprise, she encountered Callum at the airport immediately after landing. He was carrying a backpack and held a plane ticket. Seeing her, his eyes lit up with delight. Eleanor, you're finally back. He moved to embrace her, but Liam quickly stepped in, blocking him. Please, sir, have some respect. She is my wife. Callum froze for a moment, then gnashed his teeth. What are you? Get out of my way. Eleanor is my woman. Almost as soon as Callum finished speaking, Liam's fist connected with his face. Eleanor was still reeling from shock when she saw the two men lunging at each other. Frightened, she quickly called for help to separate them. In the end, someone called the police and they were all taken to the station. Luckily, Liam made a phone call, and they were released shortly after. Eleanor heard Callum was detained. Back at the hotel, as Eleanor tended to Liam's injuries, she teased him about fighting. She never expected such a refined and gentle man to engage in a public brawl. Liam smiled faintly. There's a lot you don't know about me. You'll learn in time. Eleanor was amused by his endearing expression, not fully comprehending the deeper meaning of his words. The next day, she went with Liam to the cemetery to visit her parents. She wanted her parents to see that she had found a wonderful partner, to reassure them that their daughter had found a good home, and finally, a long-awaited happiness. Get out. There's no point in you staying here anymore. The first thing Callum did after being bailed out by his family's money was to kick Serafina out. He had only kept Serafina around to spite Eleanor, but now he realized he had been terribly wrong. Callum, I've already aborted the baby. Can't you forgive me now? Serafina's eyes brimmed with tears, looking at Callum pitifully. She knew she had no other choice. No one else would marry her. She had to cling to Callum like a lifeline. However, her words only ignited Callum's fury. Shut up. Don't mention that baby to me. Callum's eyes were bloodshot, his fists clenched like a raging beast. Ever since he had learned on his wedding day that Serafina was no longer the pure, ethereal goddess he had envisioned, he had almost lost his mind, wanting to kill her. For so many years, he had been reluctant to touch Serafina because he considered her an inviolable goddess in his heart. He believed the Serafina in his mind was always that untainted girl. He never imagined that Serafina had long been sullied. With his core belief shattered, he now felt nothing but revulsion when he saw Serafina. He could never have imagined being betrayed by the friends he had known for over a decade. He had believed it was a fair competition among them, only to discover he was the only complete fool. What he found most unbearable now was that the girl who had been by his side for 8 years no longer wanted him. She had really gotten married. He hated himself for not realizing he loved her until he had lost her. Thinking this, Callum clenched his fists tightly, veins bulging on his forehead, a terrifying sight. No, Eleanor can only be mine. Even in death, she can only be Callum Hayes's. After paying respects to her parents, Liam mysteriously said he wanted to take Eleanor somewhere. When they arrived, Eleanor realized he had brought her to her childhood elementary school. She looked at him in surprise. He smiled mysteriously. Do you remember Finshaw, Eleanor? Eleanor's mind went blank for a moment. When she recovered, she looked at him incredulously, stammering. You are Finn. I don't look like him. He tilted his head, sunlight illuminating his smiling face. His handsome features slowly overlapped with the boy in her memories. Hand in hand, they walked around the school. Eleanor felt as if she had transformed back into the little girl with loving parents. She chattered endlessly about her childhood, laughing unrestrainedly when something amusing came up. He, with a joyful smile, listened attentively, occasionally interjecting with a response. They reminisced about their childhood memories, then teased him about how he had become so refined. Because the Finn of her childhood was not a quiet student. He was mischievous, loved to fight, and was fiercely loyal. He bore little resemblance to the man she now knew. They had been deskmates for 6 years because they were both short. Back then they were both mischievous, and being punished to stand outside the classroom was a regular occurrence. But whenever they caused trouble together, they would implicitly agree never to betray each other. After elementary school he transferred, and they never saw each other again. Eleanor remembered him once saying, "Eleanor, just marry me when you grow up. With a tomboy like you, I'm afraid you won't find anyone else, ha 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 ha." Thinking of this, Eleanor looked up, squinting her eyes, and asked him, "Then do you want to marry this tomboy?" "Yes, I dream of it every day." His eyes brimmed with laughter as he pulled her into his embrace. After she finished reminiscing, he explained how he had recognized her. He had worked at Aunt Beatrice's company for a while after graduating. Aunt Beatrice, knowing he was around Eleanor's age, thought of introducing them. She even showed him Eleanor's childhood photos. At the time he thought, what a coincidence. And he had eagerly anticipated meeting her. Unfortunately at that time, Eleanor was still Callum's loyal devotee. She had made him wait for several years for nothing. After a week of traveling in China, they booked their return flight. But the day before they were due to leave, an accident occurred. Eleanor was kidnapped by Callum. He had been staking out her movements for several days, finally finding an opportunity when Liam was not by her side. "Eleanor, you're not leaving me. You're mine. Even in death, you can only be mine." Eleanor was bound and thrown onto the bed. Callum, like a madman, stroked her face. She trembled uncontrollably, terrified of dying, terrified of never seeing Liam again. "Callum, I already let you and Serafina have each other. What more do you want?" Eleanor glared at him, her teeth chattering. At this moment Callum looked possessed, terrifying. "Don't mention Serafina to me. She's not worthy. Only you, Eleanor, are my true love. I love you, please don't leave me, okay?" As he spoke, he reached for the buttons of her top, his head lowering towards her neck, his warm, moist lips pressing against her skin. She struggled in fear, but his hands held her in an unyielding grip. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, the door was kicked open. Liam, breathless, rushed in with the police. Epilogue. Callum committed suicide on the day of his sentencing. Serafina, unable to accept the truth, descended into madness. Perhaps she truly loved Callum. When Callum was arrested, she had come to beg Eleanor to write a letter of forgiveness. After Eleanor refused, Serafina had laughed maniacally, saying Callum never loved Eleanor at all. She revealed that Callum had approached Eleanor all those years ago because Serafina couldn't stand Eleanor's seemingly aloof demeanor and wanted Callum to toy with her emotions. Callum had agreed without hesitation, seeing it as entertainment for her. Eleanor listened calmly, feeling no particular pain, for she had met a truly good person, and she had learned that if you're going to marry someone who is inherently good, not just someone who is good to you.